Let's get cold beer.
That was your responsibility to take care of the pork and beans.
I was gonna get.
How many different ways?
You have to have hot pads, Gene, to cool house. That's what I was wondering.
Everybody outside, outside. Line up. And the man says, Commandant, I'm fire. He says, all I can do is tick, tick. And the commandant says, don't you know we have ways to make you tuck?
Esther wouldn't let me get up and leave. I told you I told that story again.
Oh yeah.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
The bands are coming, you know.
Emergency, emergency.
Can't bring out the food.
Hello, Bill. How are you?
Let's we go up and get him.
Where did you forget them?
They're up in the motel.
The kid, Lane, cold beer in that man.
I went to Purdue for 5 years. Working at the last 2 years.
Minkle, Minkle. Oh, is that a G or a K?
And the caissons. That's not what I heard. That's not what I heard. Over there, in Ferguson's crusty trails, the caissons go rolling along.
We haven't
In
had
and out, up
In and out, up and down. I don't remember that. It's not a caisson. That's
Bought it. I know you bought it.
Hey, we're close here. Oh, got a dead camera.
Just try it.
Whoa, it's But it can be 90 degrees, and then when that sun goes down, it gets cool. Yeah, right.
cools it right down.
Up here, yeah. Looks like we might get some rain.
Hey, Phil! Hey, Phil! It's not raining yet, is it? Tell me about the weather, Phil. I've heard of Henry. Dum da da dum 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 da da dum da da dum da da. Lightning, thunder.
Well, take him on, Rod. Don't stick it dead. Get it, Rod. You gotta get it on tape. Somebody's gonna pay money. Stevie Stillberg will pay money for this.
Come on, this is fun. Are they running for the?
All right, lightning on us.
Better run faster.
Look at those, the leader, go!
Dino.
Hi, I'm Hillary. Hi, I'm Annette.
I'm Brian Joseph Benn.
I don't know who I am.
Hi, I'm Bobby.
I'm Sam Ruddy Ben.
Hubert Francis Benn.
I am
I am Adrian Burdick Ben.
This is Julia with orange on her face.
I am Phil Harlberg.
Susan Van Wahlberg.
Hi, I'm Bruce Ben.
Billy Van here.
I'm Selena Benn.
Keith Christopher Benn.
Hi, Van Ben. And the Great Party.
I'm Billy Ben. Come back shop here.
I'm Jean Benn. That's as far as I'm going.
Hi, I am Barbara Ann Ben Day Ruddy.
Hi, I'm Rodney Ben.
And we have a very special evening tonight. This is July 8th, 1983, and we are going to look at the genealogy, the background, and the history of the Benn family. We're talking with Bill Benn, who is the current historian and archivist of the Benn family. And we're going to go basically through everything as far back as we can of the Benn family. So, Bill, maybe you could tell me where things started and where they went.
Let's talk a little about genealogy here. We'll talk about the parents, Walter and Margaret Rearick, are the parents of Cecile, Hubert, Keith, and myself. And our parents were married in, I believe, 1918. And here we have the my grandfather and Keith's and Cecile's and Hubert's grandfather and grandmother, William Benn and Mary McGuigan. And I don't believe I know when they were married, but they lived in Iowa, near Dubuque, Iowa. And they had these children, Ray, who was the oldest, and he was a dentist. And I believe my father was the next in line. And then there was Hubert, who was the advertising manager for a Dubuque newspaper. And Mercedes was one of the daughters.
Now this is Mercedes McGuigan, not Mercedes Benn, right?
Mercedes Benn.
It was Mercedes Benn.
These are all Benns.
These are Benns, all right.
And Sally Benn and Glenn Benn. Right. And Glenn was the youngest, I think. I never met Glenn, but I've met all the other ones.
Now, Bill, do you know what the ethnic background of William Benn and Mary McGuigan was? Now, we've got a Mercedes here.
Right. German. Well, I think, the name Benn is English, and of course McGuigan is Irish. So, frankly, I do not know what goes back of my grandfather Benn as to whether he had brothers in this country or not, but I suspect he did. And I know I've met some Canadians whose name was Benn, and of course we read quite often about Anthony Benn over in England.
Anthony Wedgwood Benn.
Anthony Wedgwood Benn, who's quite a liberal apparently.
Quite a liberal.
Right. So I do have some more information about the McGuigan family.
There isn't any idea why they would have named a child Mercedes, though. Is there something that goes way back? Is there a?
Well, I think maybe the name Benn, maybe it's English and German. We're not sure, but it's probably partly German.
Someone mentioned a Wilhelm Benn. Do you know anything about that?
I don't think I do. No.
I refuse to comment. Okay.
Right. But at any rate, the McGuigan family is part of the family which I know something about. Of course, my grandmother, Mary, I think was, she was, Margaret was the youngest in the family. And Aunt Margaret was my great aunt, and she was my father's kind of sub rosa mother for a period of time when grandfather William Benn died, and grandmother Mary, I suppose, was on a farm and probably couldn't bring up all these children by herself. So my grandfather Walter went to live with Aunt Margaret for several years before my father came out to South Dakota from Iowa, when Uncle Tom and Uncle Ray and several other people in the McGuigan family and other people financed a bank. And they started this bank probably around 1900 in Kennebec, South Dakota. So Uncle Tom was the president of the bank, and Uncle Jim was his older brother, and he kind of took care of him all of his life. Uncle Jim was an illiterate. He could not write nor read, but he was a good farmer, and he helped with the outlying farms, and they owned quite a number of thousands of acres of property around Kennebec, South Dakota.
Do we know why they chose Kennebec? Is there any?
Well, I think they chose Kennebec because this was an area that was opened up for homesteading. And many people came out to that part of the country for homesteading, and about this time the railroad was being built through that part of the country. This was the Milwaukee Railroad, and they built the railroad out to Rapid City, South Dakota, through this country, where they finally decided to settle. And of course, Kennebec was one of the little stops along the railroad. I think the Chicago-Milwaukee built little towns about every 15 miles along the railroad, because I think that was what they needed back in those days, because they had steam locomotives and they needed to have little stations every 15 miles or so to take care of the providing for the water and the coal to keep the locomotives going. So let's see what else we got here. We've got let's talk a bit about the Rearick family, which was our mother's family. And my mother, Margaret, had 7 sisters and 1 brother. And here are the sisters: Eva and Susan and Barbara and Lydia and Gertrude, who was the only aunt who is now alive, Lenore, Ethel, and David.
Do we know anything about the Rearicks, where they came from?
Yes, David Rearick, who was my grandfather, came from South Bend, Indiana. And he came out there to South Dakota as a homesteader. And he was I think before he came out there, he was a teacher. When he came out to that part of the country, I understand he came out there to homestead, and I think he met our grandmother, Susan Melage, who was from a French-Canadian family who had come from someplace in around Windsor, Canada, or that sort of thing. They came down to Detroit and out to that part of the country, and they were homesteaders also. And so David Rearick was the Rearick name is a Pennsylvania Dutch name, which is German, really. So probably his family originally might have come from someplace in Pennsylvania, but we're not sure about that. So that's about all the genealogy I have right now. I haven't researched it any further. If anybody else has any comments about it or remarks.
Keith, could you come up? Come on up. Come on up.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that everybody understands this, so have a seat right here.
The Melage family, of which Susan was one of the members, actually owned the complete area around Kennebec, South Dakota. They donated the town site of Kennebec, South Dakota.
Oh, is that right?
And actually, up until rather recently, their cemetery was a little fenced-in area out near Highway 16, and most of the old Melaches were still in that cemetery on top of the hill there above Kennebec, South Dakota. So they essentially, the Melage family owned the town site of Kennebec and donated it to the people there.
Does anyone else know anything else about the history, the genealogy? Anyone speculate? Cecile? Come on up.
Did you have
Come on up.
Diane?
Come on down.
As I understand it, Grandpa Rearick was from, as Bill said, from back east, but he was coming through Kennebec, this area. He was from not a Mennonite colony, but they were a very close-knit colony. And when he said Pennsylvania Dutch, they were German extraction.
Right.
But he had lived in this community, and for some reason or other, he was coming to the California gold rush, one of the gold rushes in California, and he wintered over there. And Mimi told me that she remembered the oxen. Well, where's Sam? We were in this little museum today, and she remembered the oxen yoke in the barn that they had out there. And Grandpa Rearick, as Bill said, was a teacher, and he couldn't get any farther than that from Indiana, South Dakota at that time. So he kind of had to stay around for a while, and Grandma Rearick, who was about this tall and about this wide, as I remember, she was a little bit of a woman. She did all these beautiful things, and she was going all the time, and she snagged him, and that's how this family started.
Do you know anything about the Mennonites? What they were?
Well, it was that type of a Mennonite colony that he came from.
What is it? What were they like?
Well, they believed in good work.
Were they kind of a puritanical?
Yes, definitely. And
Pardon me, Amish?
Amish people, yes, yes.
Really, there are still some Mennonites.
And Grandpa Eric used to get a little bit wild every once in a while and run around. And
what does run around mean?
run around? No, well, I had two cousins who were about my age, Norma Ellickson and Donna Dyson, and we used to go out to the grandparents' place and.
The daughters of, let's see, Lydia
and
Lenore.
And by this time they'd had so many kids, and she didn't really care what we did, as long as we got to the table when it was time to eat. That's about it. Oh, really?
Not too strict.
Yeah. But her family that were new expression. They were loose. They had a good time.
In comparison to the Mennonites, you mean?
Yes.
The Mennonites were kind of...
Because Grandpa Eric's family were very strict, and they read the Bible and all that sort of stuff. And so Grandma Eric probably had a much easier upbringing.
So these two got together, and was it kind of controversial?
Yes, I would imagine it was so.
Well, I would say that grandmother was a French Canadian, so she was probably from a Catholic family.
Yes, definitely.
But when they came out that part of the country, there were no Catholic churches.
No.
There were no churches. So grandfather Rurik was a Protestant. So eventually they did go once in a while to the Methodist church.
Yeah.
But not very often, if I recall correctly.
So there was was there any kind of controversy in the family about marrying into a Mennonite? And
No, I think when Walter and Margaret got married, that was the first real Catholic they had in the family.
Oh, I see.
And Aunt Barbara told me later, it wasn't Mimi that told me this, but it was Aunt Barbara. In fact, I read a letter that she wrote to me when Mimi and Dad got married. They had combiners because it was in August when they got married, and she said they had to get all the food ready for combiners in the morning. Then Mimi and Grandpa got married, so they had that out the house, and then late in the afternoon they had the other batch of combiners coming in because this is the way it was. And this was mostly horses and an old type of a threshing machine.
Threshers.
Yeah.
Threshers rather than combines.
And this is when you cook 26 chickens in the morning for these fellas, at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Well, it seems like we're kind of moving into kind of the remembrances of what you had in your life. Maybe we can get everybody up here and talk a little bit about what it was like living back with my grandfather and grandmother, what life was like. So, Keith, you want to come up? Yes. Stay right here. Let's get everybody back up here.
Yes, Mr. Interview.
Okay, let's get everybody right here. First of all, we've got the eldest, Bill,
right,
and then second, Keith. You were the second in line,
right.
and then Hubert,
Right.
and then Cecile, the
Right.
young one, the brat, right?
Never. I was a beautiful child.
Did you guys spoil her?
Hubie and I tried to bring her up right.
Yeah, we did. We tried to bring her up.
You tried. You guys.
Absolutely.
You were kind of her.
Right.
Her.
Taught her everything she knows.
The first thing I learned was nobody ever picked on me in school because I said, don't pick on me because I got brothers who'll take care of you guys. But
All right.
One more thing. When Bill was in high school, the grade school was downstairs, and Bill was in high school at this time, and there was one kid that kept picking on me all the time, and I used that for about 3 or 4 years, don't pick on me, and he didn't believe that anymore. So I said, if you do that again, I'll take you down and beat you up. So he said, okay, do it, and I took him down and beat him up. And Bill was looking out the high school windows, and when he came home from school that day, he said, Mom, do you know what Cecile did? She took this little boy down on the playground and she beat him up. And Mimi said, like Now you'd say, so what?
So what's
Right.
new?
Yeah, so
What's new?
Hey, Susan, it comes often, doesn't it?
Well, I think the question everybody kind of wants to know is, what was life like? You went through a time in the country's history which was depression and a lot of change and a lot of wars. What was it like? Let's start with your early remembrances, Bill. Well,
Okay, I can say that when let's see, 1933, the bank in which my father was a teller or one of the officers, the bank went broke. They had lent money to farmers all around the whole area, and the farmers had given them land as security for all these loans. And then eventually all the farmers decided they wanted their money back. So when they came back to the bank had all the land for security, but they didn't have the cash to pay them. So the bank went broke.
wow.
So my father and my uncle Tom and lots of people who were involved in the bank, of course, were thought of as being very bad people because they couldn't pay the money back. Well, just a bad situation because of that time.
That was before they had any
They-
kind of federal guarantees or
That's
anything.
right.
Oh, yeah.
At that
underneath
time,
by land.
a lot of other banks had gone broke. Maybe over to 1931, 1932, lots of banks had gone broke. And this one had stayed for a couple years through this bad time. And of course, the bad times came not only just because of the economics around the country, but because of the poor agricultural situation. Because we were having bad dust storms, and we were having grasshoppers, and we were having Mormon crickets, and all kinds of things. Yeah, terrible, all kinds of plagues of things around this whole area.
So what did Grandpa do?
So eventually, my father started working with a county agency, which was trying to help as a relief agency. What it was for a period of time, and then eventually he became a federal employee with the Farmers Home Loan Administration.
Bill,
Yes.
didn't he sell insurance
Oh,
for
he
quite a
did.
while before that?
For a number of years.
Oh yeah. Well, that was
Sold
always a
insurance out of
side.
the old bank building for.
That was
for
a
quite
side
few-
issue, though. That
Right.
So he was
moonlighting.
working for the bank, and then he became a federal employee, and on the side he did insurance.
Right.
Okay.
It sold hail insurance.
Hail insurance.
Well,
All kinds of casualty insurance.
All kinds of
Casualty
insurance.
insurance.
yeah,
And in fact,
know.
for several years, he was paying the premiums for lots of people who had taken insurance policies from him. And eventually, he just came to a point where he couldn't pay people's premiums, and he had to go out and get himself another kind of job, which is what he did. And the Farmers Home Loan Administration is still in existence, and they provide loans to farmers who can't go out and borrow money from regular banks.
but didn't he get his first job down in Chamberlain? Wasn't he working in Chamberlain there in the farmer's home? Or Farm Security Administration?
It was
FSA, yeah, Farm
it
Security.
was this kind of situation, but he also eventually traveled all around the state of South Dakota as an agent for the, I suppose, the U.S. government.
He worked in Chamberlain, and he worked in Kadoka, and he worked in Merriman, and he worked in Faulkton, all as part of the Farm Security Administration.
So he was pretty busy, working
Well-
with two jobs.
He was, well, you know, when he was there in Kennebec, he could handle the insurance and so forth with Uncle Tom, which, you know, from the defunct bank. So they had a sort of an office there, and they sold insurance out of that bank. That was sort of before he went into the federal security. But then after that, when he moved to Chamberlain, and he commuted from Chamberlain, which is about 35 miles from Kennebec, to his job, so we didn't see him all week. He came home on weekends, you know, from Chamberlain. Then ultimately they transferred him to Kadoka.
Kadoka, right.
That was after I'd left Kennebec for the Navy in 1943, and then they moved him to Merriman, and they moved him up to Faulkton later on. Then.
Well, those of us
At
that
any
are
rate, the
Yeah.
30s were really bad times. all
yeah, that's
over
the
this
thing.
part of the country.
Those of us that are baby boomers that have had a fairly easy going of things. What was it like? I mean, what did you have enough to eat?
Oh, we had enough to eat. We, I would say, I think some of us probably realized things were not the best, but we got by, and it didn't seem to affect us too much.
What was it?
but,
Did you live in the same rooms?
Yes, we had our house.
We had a house that had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room, and a parlor, and there was no central heating and no indoor plumbing. I mean,
Is that right?
Path in the back, you know.
Eventually, we moved another house onto the property.
Yeah. But
So Keith and
I
Hibbert
can
and
always
I-
remember during the wintertime, it was Hubie's and my job. One of us had to haul oil into this oil stove in the parlor, and we had just pine wood and stuff like that for the fire in the kitchen. Well, it was my job, since I was in the bedroom closest to the kitchen, to get up every morning in the wintertime and go out and light the fire in the kitchen so we could get breakfast.
That must have been a bad job in the winter.
It was worse going to the bathroom outside. So it was cold out there.
I developed an allergy to wood ashes, and I used to get up in the morning, and of course I didn't have any slippers or anything like that, and I'd go out in the kitchen and light this fire.
Now, was this allergy real, or was this kind of
Well, I'd
manufactured?
start sneezing from about the time I shook the ashes down until, I could finally climb back into bed after I got the fire going, And it was about, it was well below freezing in the kitchen during the wintertime in Kennebec, South Dakota. We had any number of winters when it would be 25 or 30 below zero for 2 or 3 weeks in a row. So we, and there, the folks were sleeping in one bedroom, and I don't remember what all the sleeping arrangements were, but the 2 little bedrooms and the kitchen and so forth. So it was really, when you look back on it, we were deprived, but everybody else in that little town was in the same shape.
That's right.
And the one thing I remember about that first federal job that Dad got was, he got a check every 2 weeks for $87.
Every 2 weeks, right?
Every 2 weeks.
$87?
That's right.
And this is a family of
Well,
Six.
six.
Right.
Yeah.
What year was that?
Well, this was back in the early 30s.
34, maybe.
34.
So, as I say, I can still remember that government check, the green check, and we got it every 2 weeks, and Mom would take it to cash it, But man, that sounded like an awful small amount of money
Oh,
to
yeah.
support a family.
Crying out loud.
Must have been a great manager because you took piano lessons.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, yes, yes.
Oh, wait a minute. I didn't know
Do a
this.
whole lot of good.
I didn't know we had this hidden talent.
No, just little types of remembrances, like I was telling somebody the other day, why is it that I never liked to drink milk? Is that we bought milk in gallon cans, and we had Mr. Olson, who was the local farmer, and every spring of the year, he would turn his cows out in the green, and the first thing they would start to eat was the wild onions. Well, now this was a real situation. We had to drink that milk. It was 10 cents a gallon for that milk.
Right.
And he would bring it, delivered every day. And I just, and I'm sure that the rest of them were probably in the same situation that I was. You just couldn't drink the milk. We had to drink the milk. And that was it.
What did it taste like?
Tasted like wild onions. Can you imagine?
I guess so.
If you can imagine an onion tasting milk, this type of thing.
I don't want to imagine. That's really...
But I mean, that was some of the little things, Or on wash days, of course, when wash day came around, Mimi would usually fix up a whole great big pot full of soup. And if she forgot and burned the soup a little bit, we ate burned soup. But we never were hungry. We never were, And just like Bill said, and like he said, everybody else was in the same situation. So we didn't know we were deprived.
That's right.
Yeah. What about you, Cecile? Did you have privacy? Were you?
I was pretty lucky being the only girl.
She acquired the second bedroom in the main house.
Yeah.
So wait a minute.
Living there.
After we moved in another house from out in the country. We moved into the same lot with our main house, and this had a couple bedrooms and a living room, and we used the back rooms for the wash rooms and so forth. And we all moved out there, so we had this house out in back. It still didn't have any plumbing or anything like that, but we did have a little more room to live.
Yeah, that was great.
So
I
Cecile
remember.
acquired the second
Yeah,
bedroom.
I remember seeing fence posts like this when we used to drive out in the country and look at the fields and what the grasshoppers were doing. That Bill mentioned about the plagues, who was it laughing about the Mormon crickets? The Mormon crickets were about this big, as I remember them. They're brown bugs, and they ate everything in sight.
Well, they couldn't fly.
No.
But they just walked. But they walked. They had a characteristic. They liked to walk down a road, and they come in from the west. And actually, it became a hazard on the highway for people to drive cars because there were so many Mormon crickets on the road.
They'd slide or something?
Slick.
Yeah.
They'd get slick with these crickets on and every night when the temperature would get low, these Mormon crickets would climb up on sides of houses, and you could see many occasions when the west side of a house would be completely black with these Mormon crickets. And they just ate everything. It was green.
They paint off the side of the buildings.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Got in the house, ate the curtains.
Yeah.
You know, it was.
Well, then we didn't have what's known as a curb now. There was kind of a little dip in front of the house. They ate all. I remember them eating the bark off the trees, the American elms, and they used to go out and put what was it, kerosene in front of the streets.
Right.
To
And
keep them from
burn them.
Yeah.
You know, burn the kerosene, and when the crickets moved through, why they would just move through until the kerosene finally burned out, and the crickets came on.
Right.
Yeah, right over the.
The same thing with the grasshoppers. Those years, they were plagues. They were locusts. The same.
So most of the economy of Kadoka was pretty much agricultural.
This was Kennebec.
Kennebec.
Yeah, Kennebec. I mean, this is Kennebec, and so most of the economy was agriculture, and therefore is that what made the bank basically default, or
Complete disaster in the crops.
the crops went bad?
They tried. Few people tried to grow corn, and of course, as soon as it got green, it'd be completely wiped out. You could see a black field where there was a cornfield. And I remember one occasion when our father invested in a flax crop, and about 20 acres of flax, and it was pretty well into the harvest season, and within a few days it was going to be he was going to make enough off of that 20 acres of flax to practically keep us in food for a year. And the black crickets moved into that flax field, and within a week they had cut that flax down to a point where it wasn't even worth harvesting.
Complete loss.
A complete loss.
Wow.
Wiped out.
So what was the feeling in the house? Was there a feeling of fear and depression, or was it just?
No, we never.
Just kind of take it as it comes.
I would say I can recall sitting on the north side of the house on hot summer days, thinking about this miserable country of South Dakota, and someday I was going to move away. That's what I did think. Yes.
That's true.
That was it.
That's true.
Right.
But I remember back in those days when Huey and I were big enough to handle a paintbrush that Mom every year she'd order a 5-gallon can of white paint from Sears and Roebuck back in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Huey and I would spend half the summer with a paintbrush painting those houses, keep them white. So we spent our summers that way when we couldn't talk her into letting us off for the day to where we could go fishing.
All right. I think one thing that's on everybody's mind is, who was a disciplinarian? Was Grandpa the disciplinarian, or was Grandma?
No.
I think grandmother was, yes. I mean, mother.
What
Mother, yes.
what were the forms of punishment? I know I'm very interested in that because having experienced several modes myself.
You know how I moved at that time.
Well, I think she used a stick quite liberally.
The
yes.
stick was used
right,
quite liberally.
Oh, yes, definitely. You know, and she had either a stick or a ruler. You remember the yardstick or the ruler type thing. And she would wield it. She would absolutely.
The problem with Dad was that quite often, if he was coming home to do the disciplining, I found out several times that he got the wrong person.
What typically would get you into trouble as far as using punishment? Was there what could you get away with and not be smacked?
Oh, the worst thing was if you ever told a lie. Man, if you ever told a lie, you've had it.
You could do something as long as you told the truth about it. It was all right. But as soon as you...
primarily. But if you told a lie about that, oh my.
That was double worse, right?
Yeah, it was double worse.
More
It was,
bad.
really was. It was double worse.
What was your worst lie?
Well, the time that I brought, we used to have the parasite types of of hair snakes. You probably don't know what a hair snake is, but it's just a little parasite that comes out after rain and it wriggles around in the water. And of course I had to take some of those home. And of course Cece, being you know, the girl, she resented this type thing. So she says, well, you brought home some hair snakes again. And so Mimi asked me, well, did you bring home any hair snakes? And I said, no, they're just rubber bands. Well, of course, you know. So this was double bad time. It really was.
That's reaching for it.
Oh, yeah.
Keith, do you remember your worst punishment?
Well, I don't remember the worst punishment, but I remember the worst lie that Hubie ever told.
Oh, here we go.
That Hubie ever told. You never told a lie in his whole life.
We all had Benjamin air rifles.
Yes.
BB guns.
Oh, yes.
And we would go out, choose up sides in all the kids in town. Everybody had a BB gun, and we'd go out and have BB gun fights, you know. And we'd go along the little creek that ran along town, and we'd catch a guy in a tree or catch a guy someplace else. We'd shoot him, you know, with a BB gun, and it'd raise a nice blood blister and so forth. Well, we did this practically all one summer. We'd have all these choose up sides and have these fights, you see. But one time we were shooting at one another, and a kid shot at a fairly long range and hit Hubie in the eye with this thing. And of course, Hubie got a big red blood blister in his eye, and of course we couldn't tell Mom that we were having BB gun fights. So he told Mom that he'd fallen down and got a stick in his eye. And I don't think Mom ever knew that we were having BB gun fights.
Oh, he got away with that one.
He got away with that.
Good for him.
Yeah, I think that's true.
One of the participants in these fights, I remember one deal we had, as I say, down along this old creek along town, and a friend, was it a cousin of Jim Abner's that was?
Right.
And
Freddie.
Freddie Abner. Jim Abner is now representative for a senator from the state of South Dakota.
Right.
But anyway, he was included, but this cousin of his came out to visit, you know, and of course he had to get involved in the fights too.
Oh, yes.
And one day we'd go along the creek and hide, you know. Well, he climbed up in the top of the railroad bridge that ran over the creek, and it so happened that he had a defective air rifle. So every time he pointed the gun down, the BB wouldn't load so he couldn't shoot down. But Hubie and I trapped him up there in the bridge up above us, and we just gave him hell. He was squirming around up there, and we kept peppering him in the seat. Really burned him.
Really?
May I tell you one more thing that I remember about the Depression?
Yeah.
This little house that they had, they used to paper every year, and Keith got to do the ceilings because he was the tallest and had the longest arms. And every year they had to do the whole house, and the ceilings had to be papered with white, and it had a border around the side of it, and then all this other stuff down the walls. And I can remember them doing this every year, and what I remember most was in the summertime when it got so hot that wallpaper cracked. You could hear it cracking in the summer. Do you remember that? Do you?
I do.
I remember when that wind would, and the wallpaper was probably, that was what was holding the house together. It was probably that thick, you know. But I remember that cracking in the summertime because it was so hot.
Wow. What about your lies?
What, my lies?
Did you tell any big
Oh, I never told a lie in my life. The biggest and probably the best lie I ever told was when I got a D in deportment. You know, because I was supposed to be a nice little girl, and I wasn't a nice little girl.
What's deportment?
Deportment was behavior, and I was always talking or punching somebody or something, or fighting with somebody in school. And I took my report card home, and it was in spring, and I got a D in deportment, and I knew I was going to get it when I got home. And so I buried it under a friend's house, you know. I was the first one home. Yeah, I buried my report card. And when I got home, Mimi said, "Where's your report card?" And I said, "Well, I lost it in the wind, you know."
The wind.
The wind blew it away, you know.
Wind has a way of doing that.
There's no way that the mother's going to believe that. In the meantime, somebody across the street had seen me bearing this report card. You know? So all Mimi said was, go back and get your report card. I said, the wind blew it away, or I lost it in the storm, you know, one of these stupid things. Go back and get your report card. You know, this went on for about she didn't get mad at me or anything, just go back and get your report card. So I got my snowsuit on and I went back and got my report card. Then I got the ruler when I got home.
The old ruler. Any lies? Any lies?
No lies here.
No lies. Oh, now, come on.
Come on.
I think we need a round of applause for these wonderful people.